What makes a Five Nights at Freddy's game good? Is it the gameplay, something that can range from spastically flicking your camera over 100 times in 1 second to adding as many gimmicks as possible until your screen resembles that of a 4-year-old with ADHD? Is it maybe the atmosphere, the mandatory droning noises along with the fan on your desk, effortlessly putting you in the shoes of the average minimum wage worker in a rusty, so retro, and honestly really gross place? Or maybe, just maybe, is it how funny the jump scares can be? My two personal favorites being the white woman jump scare from FNAF Security Breach, which is the first and only time that I'm going to mention that game in this video, and the way Bonnie fucking clocks you in the joy of creation. So now that we've established what makes a FNAF game good, we should talk about how all of those things can come together and make a FNAF game perfect. Because just having animatronics with the most teeth, the best character design in the entire series, or even the amount of threats you have to face each night just isn't enough. I mean, seriously, can you imagine someone saying that FNAF 2 is a perfect sequel? What kind of stupid idiot moron would you have to be to make such a wretched statement?
This is the same reason FNAF 2 is regarded as the perfect sequel.
This philosophy extends to fan games as well. Personally, I'm kinda picky when it comes to fan games in general, so unless you try something actually unique with the game you're making, I probably won't care too much about it. There's only so many furries jumping at me that I can handle before I want to bash my head into a wall, but it wasn't always like this. There was a point where this formula was fresh. Hell, some might even say revolutionary for the indie horror genre, and even horror games in general. And coincidentally, this also happens to be the perfect Five Nights at Freddy's game. Chapter 1: The Great Depression. The roots of Five Nights at Freddy's really begin in the 1930s, when okay, you all know the backstory. Scott Cawthon used to make some less than stellar games, and eventually got the idea to turn his sorta creepy, dare I even say uncanny, characters into this little thing called Five Nights at Freddy's, which is now probably making him enough money that he's wiping his ass with $100 bills. But why was FNAF so popular? And I'm specifically talking about the first game. Sure, Scott made all the games in the series one after another at the pace only rivaled by the Euphoric brothers in their hit masterpiece franchise Garten of Banban, so that played a huge part in keeping everyone interested. But what was the real hook? Well, in the Dark Ages, where every single horror game was either Call of Duty or still trying to ride off the success of Slender the 8 Pages by making a game based off a creepypasta with varying levels of quality just a couple of years too late, FNAF not only had a novel concept for its story, setting, and monsters, but also an entirely new style of gameplay that really hasn't been seen in the horror genre before it. Where in any other horror game you usually have one of two options. Either defend yourself from the monster by somehow stunning it or even harming it, usually using lead, or run away like a pussy. In FNAF, you're chained down in your dingy little office. The only movement you can make is moving your head left to right, and the only thing standing between you and a gory end is a door. Probably bought from Temu or its equivalent in 93, 92, or 1998, or whenever the fuck the first game takes place in, which is something we'll talk about later. Instead of exploring an uncharted area or trying to escape a haunted house, FNAF has you holding down the fort, where your only ally is your wits and the speed at which you can flick your mouse. Fun fact, this was preparing everyone for FNAF 2, not for the purpose of putting the Freddy mask on or checking the cameras in that game, but rather seeing how fast you can close your tabs full of Toy Chica Rule 34. With the amount of FNAF games now, this whole formula of sitting down, checking your cameras, and occasionally shutting doors seems really stale. And if it's not stale, then you probably got tricked by the amount of convoluted crap people like putting in their fan games because holy shit, I just want to play a game, not read the Bible. Sometimes less is more, and I think the original game is a perfect example of that. What I especially appreciate in regards to this is how pretty much all of the game's mechanics are explained to you via an in-universe tutorial recorded by Phone Guy.
Hello,
the closest thing you have to a friend in this setting. I really enjoyed when video games hide their tutorials or HUDs using actual props inside of the world. The best example of this, in my opinion, is Dead Space, and how pretty much the entire HUD and inventory are an in-universe part of the protagonist's suit. The spine is your health meter, each gun shows you how much ammo it has thanks to the holographic display built into the actual weapon, and even all the text logs you find appear as projections that Isaac reads himself. It's design choices like that which really help you immerse yourself in the experience. And it especially works in horror games when it's done well. Tangent aside, if you actually listen to the phone calls, for the most part you can play the game without any guide, with a little trial and error here and there of course. So let's finally get to properly talking about the gameplay. One important thing to get out of the way though, why the fuck does pressing escape close the entire game? I could understand going back to the main menu, but closing the entire game pisses me off. One thing I always enjoyed about the main menu is how it's already framed as if Freddy is staring at you through a camera. And if this was your first time interacting with the series, there was still the question of, was this thing in front of you really just a machine that's spazzing out due to some camera glitches? Or is there actually more to it? Which random events that can occur during the nights pretty much confirm. After pressing play, you get about 10 seconds of exposition before the main gameplay loop starts, which is something I appreciate. Upon first checking your camera inside the office, you'll see 3 out of the 4, technically 5 imminent threats to your well-being. And despite how similar most of them are in the fact that the second they're in your office you get fucking boofed, they all have their own little gimmicks that are unique to them. Chica has this one room where you can only know she's there by hearing her knock stuff over. Foxy just sprints at you, Freddy is harder to spot on the cameras and is overall a piece of shit, and Bonnie is Bonnie. He doesn't really do much. If anyone cares, Foxy is my favorite. Thank you. The 5th Turbo Mystery character is Golden Freddy, who, much like his younger, less shiny brother, is also a piece of shit because his jump scare crashes your game. Oh, and also he's the one that murders Phone Guy.
I always wondered what was in all those empty heads back there. No.
Golden Freddy ties into my favorite part of this game, which is all the Easter eggs that can occasionally occur during gameplay. The random hallucinations, posters changing, and one of my personal favorites is the one where all of the heads in the spare parts room just stare at you. These random events are something that ended up being used less and less with each new game after FNAF 3. Hell, you'd think Ultimate Custom Night, a game that has 50 characters, would have tons of Easter eggs, but at most there's like 5. They're just a way to keep the game fresh, and plus, in a way, Golden Freddy is like the Mario 64 Luigi of the game. If you swear on your life to a friend that you saw Freddy but yellow, who randomly appeared in your office and crashed your game, but there's only like a 1 in 32,000 chance he'll appear, your friend would label you as a liar and a loser. There is one more random event which is my actual favorite, and it only happens when you die. There's a 1 in 1,000 chance it can occur, and this is what that looks like. This is fucking terrifying, and although it never happened to me, if I was 10 and saw this for myself, I would not only never touch the game again, I'd stop using my computer for a week. I'd even go as far as to say that this is the best scare in the game and one of the best in the entire franchise. A part of why I think this scare is much more effective than the others is not only because it's a fourth wall break of sorts, but also because it doesn't get as watered down as the others do the more you play the game. Let's face it, no matter how good the build up to the jump scare is, if it happens every single time you fail, which is very, very often, the jump scares get watered down and just stop being scary, which is the one problem with FNAF's formula. Eventually, you'll get more frustrated than scared, and that's something every FNAF game suffers from. Something else that helps in diluting the game's fear factor is just understanding how the game works. Picture the following scenario. Every night, at a seemingly random hour, Slenderman has a chance to come in your room through the window and tickle your balls for 10 seconds before leaving. Now picture the same exact scenario, but with this added information. Every night, other than the weekends, on each hour that is not the solution of the inequality x plus 2 greater than 4, Slenderman will come in your room only if you're laying on your right side and won't tickle your balls if you didn't take a shit in the last 6 hours. Suddenly, the concept becomes less scary, huh? That's pretty much what it feels like to play FNAF after finding a guide that explains how to beat Night 6 or the 420 mode. Aside from the gameplay itself, what captivated the audiences was the game's lore, because another thing that the Easter eggs are useful for is conveying the game's story to us. Because of the oddities that happen during the game, we have the iconic 5 missing children story that is the foundation of FNAF's lore. Before there was Remnant, before there were Bonnie Piranhas, there was a man who murdered 5 children while wearing a mascot costume, who later on stuffed them inside of the animatronics which they would go on to haunt. Personally, I've kinda stopped caring about the new lore added after Pizzeria Simulator and technically Ultimate Custom Night. Everything after that point just feels like milking the franchise to me, and also shit gets really confusing. Like, I'm pretty sure there still isn't a definitive answer on what year the very first game takes place in, let alone things like what's in the FNAF 4 box, which has pretty much been confirmed that it will never be revealed. But ignoring everything aside from the first game, this story is very compelling and, as we've come to see, was an incredible hook that the series needed, which, along with the speed at which new games came out as mentioned previously, helped Five Nights at Freddy's become what it is today. As silly as the franchise has become, FNAF 1's story has always been pretty brutal. I feel like the only thing to ever properly convey this aspect of it is some of the VHS fan series people made on YouTube, and I do mean some because good god there's so many of them. Whether you love them or you hate them, I think it's neat that they delve deeper into that aspect of the series' horror, and in general all of the videos you see here are just a small part of the humongous fan base that FNAF has garnered over the years. It is honestly difficult, and might even be impossible, to name another indie franchise which has a fanbase of this size. People love Five Nights at Freddy's, and it's crazy to think about how it all started with this one game that appeared in the right place at the right time. Let's Players latched onto it, theorists latched onto it, some other people latched onto it, and every single aspect of it was a recipe for success. By the way, you could make an entire documentary about all of the source filmmaker shit that the FNAF community would make over the years, but that's a video for another time. Five Nights at Freddy's 1 can only be described as a phenomenon. It became so much more than a simple little indie horror game in basically less than a couple of years. You can talk about how the franchise is about to get a series of movies, how there's dozens of books, how this thing fucking exists, but you have to remember where it all started from. A horror game which shows you how even if people don't like your work, even if you yourself feel creatively burned out, you can still end up making something amazing that people will love. And I think that's inspiring. It's still worse than FNAF 3 because it doesn't have Springtrap though. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to like and subscribe, if not, then Slenderman will actually tickle your balls tonight. Follow me on social media, there's a link to my Discord server in the description below, and a special thank you to all of the Patreon and channel members, with a special thank you to ItsSeanIGuess. That's about it. Bye bye.